He ruled the most powerful empire on earth. Armies obeyed him. The Senate feared him. The people praised him. And yet, the very power that made him unstoppable would one day begin to break him. But that comes later. To understand how absolute power destroyed him, we must first see how he rose so high. His name was Diocletian. He was not born into wealth. He was not born into royalty. He was not even born in Rome. Around the year 244 AD, in a quiet province near the coast of the Adriatic Sea, a boy named Diocles entered a harsh world. The empire was already shaking. Borders were weak. Emperors were dying fast. Soldiers were choosing rulers by force. Rome was no longer stable. As a young man, Diocles joined the Roman army. The army was the only path for someone like him. It was brutal. It was disciplined. It was full of ambition. Men fought not only enemies, but each other for rank and survival. Diocles learned quickly. He was calm under pressure. He listened more than he spoke. He watched how generals commanded fear and loyalty. He understood one simple truth. In Rome, power belonged to the one who controlled the army. By the late 3rd century, the empire was in crisis. Emperors rose and fell within months. Some were murdered by their own guards. Others died in battle. Civil wars burned across provinces. Foreign tribes crossed the borders. Inflation destroyed the economy. The empire felt too large to control. This chaos became Diocles' opportunity. In 284 AD, Emperor Nemirian died under mysterious circumstances while returning from a campaign in the east. Suspicion spread quickly. The army demanded answers. Diocles stood before the troops. He accused the Praetorian prefect of murder. In front of the soldiers, he drew his sword and executed him himself. It was bold. It was shocking. The army responded the only way it knew how. They proclaimed him emperor. In that moment, Diocles became Diocletian, ruler of Rome. But his rule was not secure. Another general, Carinus, claimed the throne in the west. The empire was divided between two men. Civil war was now certain. The two armies met in battle in 285 AD. The fighting was fierce. Loyalties were uncertain. But during the battle, Carinus was betrayed by his own officers and killed. Diocletian stood victorious. He was now the sole emperor of Rome. Yet victory did not bring peace. The empire was too large. From Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria, danger was everywhere. Enemies attacked borders on multiple sides. Rebellions flared in distant provinces. Communication was slow. An emperor in Rome could not respond fast enough. Diocletian understood something others did not. One man could no longer control this empire alone. Instead of holding power tightly, he made a radical decision. In 286 AD, he appointed a trusted general named Maximian as co-emperor in the West. For the first time in Roman history, the empire had two equal rulers. Many were shocked. Rome believed in one supreme emperor. But Diocletian was practical. He cared more about control than tradition. The empire began to stabilize. But Diocletian went further. In 293 AD, he introduced a new system called the Tetrarchy. Two senior emperors, called Augusti, and two junior emperors, called Caesars, would rule together. Each controlled a region. Each commanded armies. Each defended borders. It was a bold experiment. Power was now structured, clear, organized. Diocletian kept the east. Maximian ruled the west. Two younger men, Galerius and Constantius, supported them. For the first time in years, the empire had direction. Diocletian moved the center of his power away from Rome. He chose the city of Nicomedia as his capital in the east. This was another shocking move. Rome was no longer the political center of the empire. The old traditions were fading, but the results spoke loudly. Borders were secured. Rebellions were crushed. The army was reformed. Taxes were reorganized. Administration became strict and efficient. Diocletian did not rule like earlier emperors. He changed how power looked. He wore rich robes. He demanded deep bows from officials. He presented himself not just as emperor, but as a distant, almost divine ruler. Access to him was limited. Ceremonies became grand. He created an image of untouchable authority. The message was clear. The emperor was above all. This new style shocked many Romans. In the past, emperors had acted like first citizens. Diocletian acted like a king of kings. But fear brought order. He also reformed the economy. Inflation had crushed the empire. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Coins had lost value. Diocletian tried to fix prices through a massive law known as the Edict on Maximum Prices. It set limits on how much goods and services could cost. It was strict. Violations could mean death. The intention was stability. The result was mixed. Some merchants hid goods. Black markets grew. But Diocletian believed strong control was necessary. He also expanded the army. He divided provinces into smaller units to prevent governors from gaining too much power. He increased bureaucracy. Thousands of officials now managed the empire. Control was everywhere. And for a time it worked. The empire stopped collapsing. Enemies were pushed back. Internal chaos slowed. The people began to feel safe again. Diocletian looked unstoppable. But behind this powerful image was a ruler carrying immense pressure. He trusted few. He relied heavily on Galerius, his Caesar in the east. Galerius was ambitious and harsh. Together, they believed unity required strict obedience. This belief led to one of the darkest chapters of his rule. In 303 AD, Diocletian began the great persecution of Christians. Churches were destroyed. Sacred texts were burned. Many believers were imprisoned or executed. He believed religious unity would strengthen Rome. Instead, it planted seeds of suffering and resentment. Yet even at this peak of authority, something unexpected happened. Diocletian made a decision no emperor before him had ever made voluntarily. He chose to step down. In 305 AD, after years of rule, he announced his retirement. He forced Maximian to retire as well. Power passed to the Caesars just as his system intended. The world was stunned. No Roman emperor had willingly given up absolute power. Diocletian left politics and moved to a palace he built on the Dalmatian coast. There, he lived quietly, tending gardens and growing vegetables. When later asked to return to power during new conflicts, he refused. He reportedly said that if they saw his cabbages, they would not ask him to rule again. It sounded peaceful. It sounded like a perfect ending. The unstoppable emperor had risen from nothing, reshaped Rome, and stepped down on his own terms. But power has long shadows. The system he built would soon crack. Rivalries would return. The unity he forced would collapse into civil war. And the weight of what he created would reveal its cost. The rise of Diocletian was bold, strategic, ruthless, effective. He saved an empire on the edge of destruction. Yet in building a structure of absolute control, he changed Rome forever. And as we move forward, we will see how the very power that made him unstoppable began to show its hidden price. He had saved Rome. He had ruled with iron control. He had stepped down by choice. So how did the most powerful man in the world end up watching his life's work fall apart? When Diocletian retired in 305 AD, he believed he had done the impossible. He had rebuilt a broken empire. He had created order out of chaos. He had designed a system that would survive without him. But power does not leave quietly. The moment he stepped away, cracks began to form. The Tetrarchy, his system of 4 rulers, depended on loyalty and discipline. It depended on men accepting their place. It depended on ambition being controlled. That was its weakness. When Diocletian and Maximian retired, the Caesars, Galerius and Constantius, became the new senior emperors. 2 new Caesars were appointed. On paper, the transition was smooth. In reality, tension was already rising. Constantius died suddenly in 306 AD while on campaign in Britain. His troops did not wait for approval from the system. They declared his son, Constantine, as emperor. At the same time, in Rome, Maximian's son, Maxentius, seized power for himself. The careful balance Diocletian had built began to break. Multiple men now claimed authority. Old loyalties returned. Armies chose their own leaders. Civil war slowly returned to the empire. Galerius tried to hold control. He tried to enforce the structure. But he could not command the same respect Diocletian had once inspired. The empire was slipping. From his palace in Dalmatia, Diocletian watched from a distance. He had stepped away from politics. He focused on farming. He built grand walls around his residence. He lived in comfort, but news of conflict reached him. In 308 AD, chaos grew so serious that he was asked to return. A meeting was arranged at Carnuntum. Diocletian came out of retirement to restore order. For a moment, he stood again among rulers. He tried to repair the system. He tried to force stability. He persuaded Maximian to step down again. He reorganized titles and ranks. But something had changed. His authority was no longer absolute. He could advise. He could influence. But he could not command the same obedience. The empire had moved forward without him. And ambition had grown stronger. Soon new wars erupted. Constantine fought Maxentius. Licinius fought rivals in the east. Blood was spilled across provinces. The unity Diocletian had forced began to dissolve. His system had been strong when he controlled it. Without him, it struggled. But political failure was only one shadow over his legacy. There was another, the Great Persecution. Years earlier, Diocletian had approved harsh laws against Christians. Churches were destroyed. Believers were arrested. Some were executed. He believed this would restore unity and honor the old Roman gods. Instead, it created martyrs. It strengthened the faith he tried to erase. After his retirement, the persecution continued under Galerius. But resistance did not fade. Christian communities endured. They adapted. They survived. In 311 AD, something shocking happened. Galerius, once a strong supporter of persecution, fell ill. On his deathbed, he issued an edict ending the persecution. He admitted it had failed. He asked Christians to pray for the empire. The policy Diocletian had supported was undone. Within a few years, Constantine would rise to power in the west. In 312 AD, before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, Constantine claimed to see a sign in the sky linked to the Christian god. He won the battle. In 313 AD, the Edict of Milan granted religious tolerance across the empire. Christianity was no longer illegal. It was protected. The same faith Diocletian had tried to crush would later become the empire's dominant religion. History had turned against him. His reforms had strengthened the state. His army reforms had secured borders. His tax system had increased revenue. His division of provinces improved control. But they came at a cost. His government was heavy. Taxes were strict. Professions became locked. Sons were forced to follow the jobs of their fathers. Social movements slowed. The empire became rigid. Control had created stability, but it had also created pressure. Many citizens felt trapped. Farmers struggled under tax demands. Merchants feared strict price laws. Bureaucracy expanded. The state watched everything. The emperor had saved Rome by tightening his grip. Now that grip was shaping a different empire. More centralized, more distant, less flexible. Diocletian likely believed he had done what was necessary. He had faced collapse. He had chosen order over freedom. He had chosen strength over softness. But absolute control carries weight. As civil wars returned after his retirement, one question became clear. Had he truly fixed the empire? Or had he only delayed its deeper problems? Constantine eventually defeated his rivals and became sole ruler. He dissolved the Tetrarchy. He moved the capital east and founded Constantinople. The empire changed direction. Diocletian's system did not survive intact. His image as a divine and distant ruler, however, remained. Later emperors would continue to rule with ceremony and separation. The simple image of the early principate was gone forever. In many ways, Diocletian reshaped the Roman Empire into something new. Some historians call it the beginning of the Dominate period, an era where the emperor ruled openly as master. It was no longer a disguised republic. It was open monarchy. But what of the man himself? In his final years, Diocletian lived quietly in his palace near the sea. Massive stone walls surrounded him. Towers rose above the coast. Guards protected the gates. Even in retirement, he lived like an emperor. Yet he stayed away from power. Sources suggest he may have grown ill. Some accounts say he suffered from mental and physical weakness. Others claim he became withdrawn. In 311 or 312 AD he died. The exact cause is uncertain. Some later writers hinted at despair. They suggested he may have taken his own life after seeing his system collapse. But firm proof does not exist. What we do know is this: he began life as a soldier from a humble province. He rose through discipline and strength. He saved an empire in crisis. He ruled with unmatched control. He stepped down at the height of his power. And then he watched his design unravel. That may have been his greatest burden: to build something vast, to control every detail, to believe it would endure, and then to see it change beyond recognition. Absolute power gave him authority over millions. It gave him fear and respect. It gave him the ability to reshape history. But it also isolated him. It forced harsh choices, tied his name to suffering. It placed the fate of an empire on his shoulders. In the end, Diocletian did not fall in battle. He was not assassinated. He was not dragged through the streets by enemies. He walked away. Yet the power he once commanded left marks that outlived him. His reforms strengthened Rome for a time. They bought decades of survival. They prepared the empire for transformation. But they also hardened it. And as new rulers rose, they inherited both his strength and his burden. Diocletian stands as a paradox: a savior and a controller, a reformer and a persecutor, an emperor who reached the peak of authority and then stepped back into silence. He seemed unstoppable, but even he could not escape the cost of absolute power. In the story of Rome, his life reminds us of a simple truth: power can build empires, but it can also reshape the soul of the man who holds it. And sometimes the greatest victory is not winning power. It is surviving what power does to you. If the story changed the way you see power, then join us for the next one. Subscribe now to explore the hidden truths of history. Like this video to support the journey, and press the bell so you never miss the rise and fall of the world's greatest empires.